Hello, it's Amy, and I'm here with another chapter of A London Book Window by James Milne. I know it's not Friday, it's Wednesday, but I thought I would slip in an extra chapter this week to make up for the fact that last week's chapter was late going up. And also, I'm getting semi-near to the end of the book, which makes me want to read it even faster, because as I'm reading aloud here, I'm reading it aloud for you, but I'm also reading it aloud for me, because when I come to these chapters, I haven't yet read them myself. I just sit down and I read aloud to myself, I read aloud to you, and I enjoy the experience. The next chapter is called An Essayist of Life. Why is it that people who can write good books are slow to do it, while those who cannot are as fruitful as you like? Sometimes it may just be the chance of circumstances. There is a deeper, a more persistent, a less conquerable reason, which belongs, as all things belong, to human nature. A good book, that is, a real book, has to have a mind, a heart, and a soul, and it can only get them from the writer. This means such a giving out of personality that emotional torture goes before and physical exhaustion comes after, and there is a natural shrinking from both. The baby of authorship is like the baby of life. It testifies the labor of creation. It is the divine visiting the earth as nearly as it may, but the beautiful joy has to be paid for, and the price can be high. Does any of us know a friend gifted and crucified like this, who would not rather run away forever than sit down to a day's writing? His case or hers is far worse because the adventure ahead is unknown than that of the bridegroom or the bride, fearful of eloping alone when the marriage day actually comes. How enviable the other writing person who can crack it out without even sitting down to ink, but how unenviable the reader who falls that way. One dreams in this manner over a little book, As You See It, by V, which Sir Algernon Methuen set afloat. Memories rise of sensitive, poignant essays met somewhere in newspaper print and marked for a future life and salutation. Now that salutation to V of The Observer is also to Mrs. J. L. Garvin, the wife of its well-known editor, for here is a title page with the secret. It is her maiden book, and yet there have been generations of literary blood on both sides of her family. Sir Henry Taylor of Philip van Artenvelde, fame of Aubrey de Vere, Una Taylor of the Edinburgh Review, and the cultured Spring Rices. If she has not readily made herself accountable to that legacy of pedigree, the reason must be that she is so worthy of it, such credit to it. No pages in our English literature give it more glory than those written by its essayists, a Charles Lamb of old or an Augustine Birrell of today. Since the Great War, the English essayist had a brave new blooming, and the battle caught the pen of V, where France's shoulder, if it might be naked and snowy, woos the Channel Sea. And that seems to be a quote from a work. V is just the letter V in quotes, and we have followed here a line in quotes, which I'm assuming is from the work, where France's shoulder, if it so might be, naked and snowy, woos the Channel Sea. You gather that she has poetry as well as prose, and what you cannot fail to gather is that she is an essayist distinctive by herself. She makes a page of a paper a page of life, or death as it may be, not just an excursion in phrases, or a travel in words, like the squirearchy of essayists. That is a new word, squirearchy? Squirearchy, I think it's supposed to be squirearchy. Squire and archie, like the squirearchy of essayists in this day. Her essays are herself, and if heavily wise people who write at each other, forgetting the world by the world forgotten, were to call them impressions, why it is no matter, because under that name her roses, fragrant in their natural wildness, smell quite as sweet. Perhaps it is true to declare of Fleet Street that it has more trouble in harpooning V's word about a policeman, a perfect paragraphist, than in finding a managing editor. Is it not Mr. Kipling who says that the elimination of the unessential is the true art of life? We see this anyhow in the difficulty of the paragraph, the short story, and the essay. V has the gift of seeing instantly and clearly what matters, and of leaving alone the rest. Similarly, she can render what she sees into driving word pictures of the daily round, as we all know it. She is an idealist without too many illusions or delusions, and indeed there is a verse in her book which might, for thought, philosophy, and expression, be its spiritual motto. To live with justice, vision, and no hate, to see without looking, see but not without, giving slow judgments clemency's last doubt, knowing too well the tyranny of fate, to live with justice, vision, and no hate. The seeing eye and the revealing style, surely these are the true tools for the new English essay, which is to outmatch even the old English essay, because it will tackle life straight and stark, and not merely life through the mirror of literature, through what others have written. V is at once a blazer and a master of this new model, and in all holding, diverting, an artist and a woman. We go with her to France, say, at Boulogne, to the cemetery and little chapels where the people were asleep, or we go in search of a nun nurse who, when found, looked old, but said she was 32. She meant 32, in the Lord, the time she had spent in the convent. Why cannot we all be 32 in the Lord? The crudities, the agonies of spring are over, decay has not set in. It is an admirable age. Most of us love to read thoughts which we would wish to be our own, and we love scarcely last a chorus of words that happily etches a sentiment. Somewhere in France, V saw a man who might have been a king, and he put his long, close fingers over his drink with a gesture loving, possessive, fearful, as if someone might take it away. A gesture for a woman. ... exclamation point for some reason. Another man, also seen in France, was always writing a book for his sins, no doubt. Though he drank wine extravagantly, he wasted it in the glass, and now that I come to remember his face, it seems as if God had never quite finished that. There you feel the epigram in life before you have grasped its wording, and it might well leap from a French mentality. Leap the English Channel, however, and behold an English girl on the steps of a Belgrave Square house, waiting for her escort to the Ritz. She has cool, bare arms like lilies, ringless fingers like tuberoses. How many generations of idleness, how much fine ignorance has it taken to turn out this masterpiece? If you are curious in a frankly human sense, if you want knowledge from the deeps of the well and not from the nozzle of a fountain, then you must ask, as it were, about the small things, because mention of them does not scarce like the pontifical things. V knows this ever so instinctively, so she says, "Why is it that rouge gives a woman as much confidence as a devout lover?" She answers, "It steadies her tired nerves, it rallies her wit, and we must remember that even when there are only nerves, not wit." Another problem put to us is, what inherited phobia is it that makes people shrink from the centers of restaurants? V makes no guess at that, perhaps because it is so easy, or was when nice people weren't supposed to go to restaurants even alone. It was one long unbroken procession of express letters, last interviews, and first avowals. In Molly's sweethearting, and they nearly landed her, a sad old maid. Happily, there comes a wind for every sailor who is cunning with his sail. Even it may have come to Chris, a regular balloon girl, all white arms, wreaths, and energy. She may have known that humor has many sources, the brain, the heart, but one hopes she did not know that too often its source is a well of bitterness. When we come up against that sort of humor, we learn how supreme may be the bitterness of dropping out. On that text, V has an essay so poignant that it positively hurts, especially the woman who had always swept a crossing in Belgravia until one Sunday morning when she fell down on the pavement in a ragged heap. Yes, it is only when the letter of one's heart is threatened with missing the post that one notices the letterbox. Yes, also life has taught us to pass on, that the drunkard on his feet too often steers again for the tavern. But it is he who sees the thing through to the weary and solitary end, who is really distinguished and worthwhile. Mother Nature is a coarse savage when it comes to the dropping out, but you can hear her saying with a croak and a chuckle, "At least I give them lots of ways of going." There is the thin, tired woman, of Cassie de Cura, far away, who did her hair on top and only ate macaroni. and of two tragedies this last seemed the much greater. Undoubtedly, it would have seemed so to Mrs. Morris of Chelsea, a patient figure in a thin apron, and clearly by that token a keeper of lodgings. But Mrs. Morris only looked out of the window, searching the dark heavens, when it was demanded of her. Tell me just once what makes the whole bally thing worthwhile. Is it worthwhile? Do you know? Does anybody know? Does nobody know? But Mrs. Morris understood Chelsea, and taking her bearings from that anchorage, she found a philosophy all right. Up west, quoth she, the women have lovers because they can't afford to live without them. Down here, the women don't have lovers because they can't afford to live with them. See? Essays indeed of town and country life. On the one hand, we hear Mrs. Morris, you're a good sort, you won't let one down, only for some people life, like Jesus of Nazareth, passes by. On the other hand, we visit a sleeping water, a canal in the deep green heart of the country, rich not with the industry of labor, but with the laziness of untroubled weeds. Should you linger by the sleeping water, notice how the heron's flight is that of a celestial messenger bringing important, if not happy, tidings to an expectant people. A sonnet on the heron would not say more, unless Mrs. Garvin were to write it herself, for she must remember her literary call of the blood. And that's it, an essayist of life. And I'll just show you the pages here, because those last several pages were literally a compilation, a jumbling together of quotes from the works of this author V, which made it somewhat challenging to read. And I think it probably comes across as very rambling. And I'm going to be honest, this is the first essay in here where I'm not quite sure where James Milne was going with the topic of it. I guess what he wanted to do was just give a compilation of slices of life, so to speak, of observations of various people and circumstances. So that is that, and the next chapter in here is titled, Were the Victorians Dull?